Okay, so who will host the 2026 Rugby League World Cup? Now, Rugby League at the international level is really poorly organised. I think we can all agree on that. And you look at the international calendar, apart from the Tonga tour to England coming up in November, which I'm really looking forward to. I am looking forward to that. There's not a lot to really look ahead to when it comes to international rugby league past the end of this year. The 2021 World Cup, I did enjoy it, but too many empty seats, too many blowout scores. Delaying it by a year was disastrous because it lost money, and that has impacted the decision making by the French pulling out of hosting the 2025 edition. Now, earlier this summer, the International Rugby League Board met in Singapore. I don't know why they chose Singapore, but they chose Singapore, and they decided to delay the 2025 World Cup to 2026, and that it will be hosted in the Southern Hemisphere. That's all we know, is it's going to be hosted in the Southern Hemisphere. Now, the locations you can use in the Southern Hemisphere are limited, basically Australia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, and the Pacific Islands. Now, I would think New Zealand will most likely be the hosts, the standalone hosts. They've got the stadium infrastructure, which was all upgraded for the 2011 Rugby Union World Cup, which the All Blacks won. And Rugby League World Cups are generally smaller in size and scope, so you need less hotel infrastructure and accommodation for all the teams, and you'll have less fans, obviously, descending on a country with only a population of 5 million people. I think New Zealand will be the hosts of 2026. They've already said they are interested in stepping up where the French have failed and the Americans have failed, because the 2025 tournament, when it was initially slated, was meant to take place in the US. There were cost concerns around that organisation of that 2025 World Cup in the US, so they pull out, and then the French step up and say, we'll do it. Then we have the 2021 World Cup delayed till last year, and there was all this big hyping up of the next tournament in France, a lot of discussion around it, and then beginning of this year, early summer, the French government pulled the plug on government funding for the tournament, again citing cost and would it be profitable. So the French government pulled the plug. Now, the French government have really gone hard, and the French sporting governing bodies have really gone hard with hosting a lot of major sporting events and bidding for a lot of major sporting events. So they've hosted the men's football Euros in 2016, the Women's World Cup in 2019. Obviously, they've currently got, as we can see, the Rugby World Cup right now, and they're hosting the Olympics next year. They're also putting in bids for a variety of major sporting events, including the IIHF World Championship Ice Hockey for 2028. The French government have definitely got this policy of bidding and hosting major sporting events, and the Rugby World Cup was a victim of French government funding being pulled. Now, at the time that happened, we then found out that the Olympics and their organising companies and the infrastructure companies that are being tasked with getting the Olympics up and running and building all the infrastructure, they're being investigated for financial crimes, embezzlement. Basically, funds have gone missing, which may have also contributed to the French government going, we're pulling the funding from the Rugby League World Cup. Now, there's already a very tense relationship between the French Rugby League and the French government that goes back to the Second World War and the 50s. The relationship between Rugby League and France and the French government is not great. But without the French, we don't have the Rugby League World Cup. So without the French, we don't even have the Football World Cup. Just let that sink in. But I digress. So the International Rugby League Board had their annual general meeting in Singapore earlier this year in the summer, and they've stated that in 2026, so the tournament's been delayed by a year, it's going to be hosted in the Southern Hemisphere. They've not said New Zealand, Australia, Papua New Guinea, the Pacific Islands. They've not stated it would be co-hosted. They've just said it will be hosted in the Southern Hemisphere. So that leaves it open to interpretation. But I do think New Zealand will most likely step up and host the tournament as a standalone entity. I think they can do that. And you look at the Warriors returning to New Zealand, you look at the crowd numbers when the other NRL teams go to New Zealand, you look at the crowd numbers from the 2017 tournament, the crowds at Mount Smart Stadium were fantastic. There's a big Pacific Island population in Auckland. And you look at the crowds this season for the Warriors, they've sold out every home game, which has definitely helped boost the team on the field. They've made a good run into the finals, just falling just short of reaching the grand final, but crowd numbers in New Zealand have been fantastic. There's also the question mark of where will the 18th NRL team go. There is a strong drive to get a second team in New Zealand, so that's still on the table. So I think it will be New Zealand, but we may see a co-host with Australia and Papua New Guinea again. We may see co-hosting also with the Pacific Islands. We may see, Australia, Papua New Guinea, New Zealand, and the Pacific Islands all decide to co-host games, which could work. But nothing's set in stone. And this is where rugby league lags behind other major international sports when it comes to the big international tournaments. Is sorting out a replacement host or sorting out just hosting tournaments, getting lower level international rugby league play with those developing nations, giving them some international game time, and organising an international calendar. We've seen with the IIHF, they were very, very, and that's ice hockey. They were very, very quick to, during COVID, find new hosts when the Russia, Belarus, and all the issues surrounding that. Again, finding a new host location. They were very, very good at organising. We've seen, with Olympics and Euros and World Cups that in other major sporting events, that again, if a host has to pull out, another host can be found quite quickly. When it comes to rugby league and international organisation and in governance in general, it really lags behind. So I mean, just look at the international calendar coming up. Apart from Tonga touring England later this year at the end of the season, the international calendar going into 2026, nothing's really set in stone. There's no real international calendar that's on a regular cycle. So the developing nations that want to take that next step get to play games. Australia, New Zealand, and Great Britain, basically England, they might have a few tests between each other, but not a lot. So this is where rugby league lets itself down. There needs to be a massive overhaul of international governments of the sport. But we shall see where the 2026 World Cup gets hosted. Who do you think is going to host the 2026 World Cup? I'm going for New Zealand. They've already stated that they are interested in stepping up to host, though nothing's been confirmed as of yet. They do have the stadium infrastructure, which was all upgraded for the 2011 Rugby World Cup, which the All Blacks won. So they got that stadium infrastructure in place. I don't think crowds will be a problem. But we shall see. Who do you think will host? And is there a future for the Rugby League World Cup long term? So I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for your time. Please place your comments in the comment section below, and I will have some more content for you very, very soon.